Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. A Russian strike on Ukraine's Dolinka has killed a 9-year-old and injured a 16-year-old during an attack involving 109 drones and 5 missiles. Meanwhile, 14 were injured in Russia's Rilsk and Artakovo after Ukrainian drones hit homes. Although Russia says it is ready to meet Ukraine in Istanbul on Monday to discuss peace, Kyiv is yet to confirm its attendance. The U.S. Supreme Court has cleared key legal obstacles to President Trump's immigration agenda, enabling mass deportations while still emphasizing the importance of constitutional due process. Legal experts have expressed concern over the aggressive approach, though the White House has welcomed the rulings. After denying access to Ramallah through Gaza, Israel has made it clear by saying it will not cooperate with a planned visit of the Arab foreign ministers, calling the meeting that aims to promote Palestinian statehood a provocative move that threatens Israeli security. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that China wants to dominate and control Asia. As he speaks at the Shangri-La Dialogue Defense Summit, Hegseth calls on Asian countries to boost military spending over what he calls an imminent threat from China. President Trump says he plans to double tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to 50%. Increasing pressure on steel producers amid further global trade tensions. Canada and Australia have condemned the move, which has seen shares of steelmakers surge. President Donald Trump has said that Pakistani representatives are heading to the U.S. next week for trade talks. President Trump also revealed that a trade deal with India is very close, but that no deal will be struck with either nation if they engage in any military action. Based on a confidential report by the International Atomic Energy Agency has revealed that Iran has carried out secret nuclear activities using undeclared nuclear material at 3 specific sites according to the investigation in November last year. Flooding in Niger State, Nigeria between Wednesday night and Thursday morning has killed 151 people according to the latest reports. Over 3,000 people have been displaced and more than 500 households affected, as rescue efforts are still continuing. In the latest turn of events surrounding U.S. President Trump's tariffs and their global impact, China's manufacturing sector contracted for the second consecutive month in May. This comes despite a recent pause in the U.S.-China trade conflict. According to China's National Bureau of Statistics, the Purchasing Managers Index, a key gauge of industrial activity, stood at 49.5%. While this is a slight improvement from April, it still signals a slowdown in growth. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced plans to double tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from 25% to 50%. U.S. steel prices have surged 16% since January, now reaching nearly $1,000 per metric ton, considerably higher than prices in Europe and China. In a significant development, Trump has endorsed a deal for Japan's Nippon Steel to partially acquire U.S. steel. The agreement reportedly includes major investments in American steel facilities, a U.S.-based leadership team, and a government golden share that gives veto power over key decisions. However, full details of the deal are yet to be disclosed. Yesterday, President Trump accused China of violating a bilateral agreement to roll back tariffs. He said China had breached terms related to tariffs and trade restrictions on critical minerals, issuing a veiled warning of tougher measures against Beijing. Lastly, representatives from Pakistan are expected to visit Washington next week to discuss tariffs. Pakistan faces a possible 29% tariff on its exports, triggered by a $3 billion trade surplus with the U.S. as part of the broader tariffs announced last month. Now we have guest Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst. He's joining us from Taipei. Thank you for joining us today. President Trump announced he will double steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%. What impact could this have on U.S. industries and global trade?
It's certainly good for U.S. manufacturers of steel and aluminum. They're going to face less foreign competition. One of the main issues of concern from the domestic manufacturers is foreign competition, and at times that foreign manufacturers are dumping their products in the United States at below cost. This is a long-running problem in the industry. However, the other side of the equation is that it's going to make steel and aluminum prices probably more expensive for end users in the United States, such as in the construction industry or the auto industry. Eventually, those costs get passed on to consumers, but it will certainly protect the industry, and it may also protect jobs in the industry.
And Trump claims these higher tariffs are necessary to protect domestic steel facilities. How have U.S. steel companies responded to these measures so far?
U.S. companies are big fans of the tariffs. Again, it helps protect them from foreign competition, and they've long complained about foreign competition and cheaper imports from other steel-making countries. So the industry has long advocated for higher tariffs on imports. They're getting it with President Trump, so they're very happy about it.
Now moving on to Pakistani representatives are going to the U.S. next week to discuss a possible deal on tariffs. From what we know, what are the main issues on the table in these talks?
The issue is pretty simple. Pakistan has approximately $3 billion annual trade surplus with the United States. There's an important lesson here that we think of some countries like China or Taiwan, where I'm speaking from, that have trade surpluses with the United States into the tens of billions or the many tens of billions of dollars. But even a country with a $3 billion trade surplus is not going to escape the attention of the Trump administration and the trade policymakers in the Trump administration. The challenge for Pakistan is they don't have a good political relationship with the United States. They didn't have a good political relationship with the first Trump administration. That did not improve under the Biden administration. And now that we're into the second Trump administration, it's clear that India has a great political relationship with President Trump, and Pakistan simply does not. So the U.S. government, the Trump administration, is not going to be doing Pakistan any favors in this negotiation, and Pakistan better be prepared to make some serious concessions.
And moving on to India, India is close to a deal with the U.S. and faces 26% tariffs. What advantages could this trade agreement bring for both countries?
A fair agreement to both sides is going to hopefully increase trade between the two countries. There's a lot of American companies who are very eager to be in the Indian market. There's a lot of tariff barriers as well as non-tariff barriers that prevent the expansion of American industry, American companies in India, and they really want to be there. They look at it as a market with amazing potential. So we'll have to see some serious regulatory reform, some movement on inbound tariffs by the Indian side, and I think the Trump administration will be willing to lower those tariffs from 26% to potentially even a much lower number. So there's potentially a win-win outcome in this negotiation. And I do think, to be fair to President Trump, this is one that he genuinely wants to see a good outcome. He has such a good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. He knows that India and the United States need to have a good relationship because of China-related issues. So I think this is one that President Trump genuinely wants to see done.
Thank you very much for the insight, Ross Feingold. You will stay with us for our next story. And now we move on to our next story. President Trump is praising Elon Musk as his time as a special government employee comes to an end. Standing alongside the billionaire entrepreneur, Trump hailed Musk's work in leading the White House's Department of Government Efficiency, calling it the most sweeping government reform in generations. Despite reaching his 130-day limit as a special employee, Trump says Musk isn't going far, calling Dodge his baby and hinting that the tech mogul will continue to influence the initiative from the sidelines. Musk had promised to slash $1 trillion in federal spending, even wielding a chainsaw on stage to symbolize cutting bureaucracy, but the actual savings reported stand at around $170 billion. Critics point to errors and a potential $135 billion in unintended costs. Meanwhile, as per a New York Times article, Elon Musk allegedly engaged in frequent drug use while serving as a close advisor to US President Donald Trump. The report claims that Musk regularly took ketamine to the extent that it caused bladder problems and traveled with an estimated 20 pills daily. The Times report comes days after Musk announced his exit from government service. His departure reportedly follows months of controversy, including incidents of erratic behavior, such as insulting cabinet members and making a Nazi-like salute at the political rally. Now we have Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst joining us live from Taipei. Thank you, Ross, for staying with us. Elon Musk has announced he will step back from his role in the White House, but he will remain a friend and advisor to President Trump. So what does this mean for the future of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE?
Some of those DOGE employees are still within the federal government at different agencies. So they're still doing their investigation and recommendation for additional cuts. So I think we should be prepared to see additional cuts in the near term, as long as there's still DOGE employees working at various government agencies and looking at their operations and their expenses and their staffing levels. So DOGE is not going away, even if Elon Musk has ended his time as a special government employee. And frankly, I think President Trump is still very eager to see DOGE continue doing its work. He just loves the idea of announcing significant cuts in government spending or the shrinking of government departments.
And building on that, Musk led a cost-cutting drive that aimed to save trillions by cutting government waste. How successful has this initiative been so far, according to you?
I think it's too early to tell. You just mentioned approximately 170 billion in cuts, but there was estimates of 135 billion dollars in additional expenses when you have to factor in the cost of closing down government agencies, the cost of ending or terminating contracts early, and of course the severance payments to employees who've been put out of their jobs. So I think it's a little too early to tell what exactly the final accounting will be. On the other hand, it did bring in a new mode of thinking to government. Whether one likes it or not, it's clear at least this administration is in the mode of cost cutting, like it or not, but they are going about shrinking the size of the federal government. And frankly, that's something Republicans have talked about literally for decades, and they never accomplished it. So President Trump could at least say, there's been a lot of talk about shrinking the federal government, but I've actually done it.
And building on that point, under Musk's leadership, the DOGE department cut billions from government spending, including foreign aid. What impacts have these cuts had, according to recent studies?
That's a great question, and I think it's also too early to tell. One of the main reasons it's too early to tell, traditionally we looked at foreign aid as not just a good thing to do as a wealthy country for poorer countries, but in more recent years it's become all about competing with China for influence in places like South America, Central America, Africa, and in the Pacific Island countries. And we have to see what's going to play out if the United States is not providing the same amount of aid, whether that's healthcare aid or agricultural training or other kinds of technical missions. Is China going to move in and expand its influence in other parts of the world? I think that's something that scholars and experts are going to be looking at going forward. We simply don't know the answer today.
And you've also kind of touched on, but President Trump praised Musk for his efforts and said he expects Musk to continue playing a role in his administration. How likely is it that Musk will remain involved in policy decisions?
I think the answer we should assume to that is yes, Musk is going to continue to be involved. He'll continue to be able to speak with President Trump. He'll continue to visit the White House periodically. Remember, his companies have very large or potentially very large contracts with the federal government. And he also has pledged to donate $100 million in the upcoming election cycle before the 2026 midterm election. He's pledged to donate $100 million to political committees controlled by President Trump. So he's still very much a factor in the White House, in President Trump's politics, and in the political conversation.
And last but not least, switching gears here, there have been reports linking Musk to drug use during the 2024 campaign as well as recently. What can you tell us about it?
Well, the New York Times had their so-called expose on potential drug use by Elon Musk. We simply don't know whether or not that's true. But it's in the past as well. I mean, talking about Elon Musk potentially doing drugs during the 2024 election, it's irrelevant. He still wrote a big check or many big checks to President Trump, and President Trump was elected, and he invited Musk into the government. So, going over what happened in 2024 seems kind of irrelevant. It may be more relevant whether or not he was taking drugs during the period that he was a special government employee subsequent to Trump's inauguration in January. But I assume that Musk is going to deny this, and it's going to be he said, she said.
Thank you very much, Ross Feingold, for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next story. President Donald Trump's administration can temporarily revoke the legal status of over 500,000 migrants living in the U.S. after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled. The court's decision lifts a previous order by a federal judge that blocked the administration from ending the parole immigration program, called the CHNV Humanitarian Parole Program, which had been established by former President Joe Biden. This program provided protection for migrants fleeing economic and political turmoil in their home countries, including Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The new order now puts roughly 530,000 migrants at risk of deportation. Under this program, migrants were allowed to live and work in the U.S. for up to 2 years for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit, according to the U.S. government. Justices Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor, two of the court's 3 liberal justices, dissented. The Biden-era program had been a key tool to provide safe and legal pathways for people fleeing difficult conditions. The Trump administration, however, had filed an emergency appeal to end this program, arguing that it was misused to allow migrants to remain in the U.S. On the day he took office, President Trump signed an executive order directing the Department of Homeland Security to get rid of parole programs. Immigrants' rights groups and migrants from the program have sued the administration, arguing that they could face serious risks of danger, persecution, and even death if deported. The ruling comes after the Supreme Court earlier this month allowed Trump officials to revoke temporary protected status for TPS for some 350,000 Venezuelan migrants for decades. Humanitarian parole programs have been used to allow migrants fleeing war as well as other crises to come to the U.S., including Cubans following the 1960s revolution. Now we have guest John Rosamondo joining us. He's a geopolitical analyst from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ross, for joining us today. The Supreme Court has lifted bans on ending temporarily protected status for hundreds and thousands of migrants. What does this mean for these communities?
Well, if you look at the targeted communities, the Venezuelans, the Nicaraguans, Cubans, are all communities that the Trump administration has identified as posing security threats. President Trump has gone after Nicaragua, which is a criminal gang from Venezuela that U.S. intelligence community has identified as having links with Venezuela's intelligence service, the Cubans, untold number of Cuban intelligence figures. So I think that this is a good win for President Trump, who ran as for president on reducing and reversing Joe Biden's open borders policy.
And according to you, what impact does the continued use of Alien Enemies Act have on migrants, particularly those alleged to be gang members?
Well, these are people who have no right to be in here to begin with. I mean, they can commit all sorts of crimes, run drugs. We have fentanyl crisis here in the United States that President Trump has made a top priority, foreign and domestic. So, allowing the president to use the Alien Enemies Act is, a win for him to be able to eliminate these criminal gangs that have festered under the prior administration.
And the court has The court has emphasized the importance of due process rights for migrants facing deportation. How is this affecting Trump's immigration policies?
Well, President Trump just wanted to throw everybody out, but the courts have said no, you can't. So this requires the administration to have a burden of proof for every migrant that they want to deport that they were involved in criminal activities. So I think that we have we're a nation of laws here. So while the administration is being reminded it has to follow the laws.
With pending cases on birthright, citizenship, and deportations to third countries, what can we expect from the Supreme Court in the coming months?
Well, I think that President Trump could end up having significant, judicial headwinds when it comes to birthright citizenship, because there's been a doctrine for some time that says that a person who is born in this country automatically becomes an American citizen. The Trump administration says that the traditional interpretation of our Constitution is not right. It's not warranted by the base in Congress. Also, I think that President Trump's other policies could end up having some significant setbacks. But I think the president is going to push forward and say, we have unelected judges that are trying to undo the will of the people.
And switching gears for a moment, critics say the administration is not complying with the court's order to return the wrongfully deported man. How significant is this?
Well, politics is politics. If you're referring to, this guy, Kilmar and Gray, I'm trying to remember his name, who was deported, accidentally to a prison in El Salvador. The Salvadorans say they're not returning it. So I think it's kind of a moot point and they can just complain.
Yeah, so according to you, what does this case reveal about the immigration system itself?
Well, I think that it reveals that there are a lot of flaws in the immigration system that allow people who don't belong in the United States to get through. And the president should be working with Congress to change the law, because the president's ability by executive order is fairly limited to a statute. In the first administration, you had DACA, which was a policy whereby the Obama administration deferred deportations and so forth that this administration fought against. So it really comes down to a lot of executive power questions.
Thank you, Ross Feingold, for joining us. And well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news